Okay, so I'm Justin Hill, and you are
I'm José Almanzar.
cool. This is an interview on your experiences in our master's program in Stony Brook. So first off, what was your mindset going into graduate study, and how has that changed by because you've had one semester at Stony Brook, right? You're a first year student.
Yeah, I've had
Yeah.
one semester so far.
So what was your mindset last summer, going into before you started the program, and how has that changed in this one semester you've had?
Yeah, honestly, I was mostly just really excited to get back into an academic setting. It had been about 2 or 3 years since I last stepped foot in a classroom. So I was just filled with excitement to finally be going back to the atmosphere that I feel most comfortable in. The atmosphere where I feel like I can grow the most, both personally and intellectually. And I was honestly just filled with excitement. But because I had been out for so long, I actually asked one of my professors to send me either a book or some articles that I can read to kind of get my, mind rolling before the semester. And he was actually kind enough to give me a series of lectures that he had on the Modern Intellectual. I don't know if you've ever heard the Modern Intellectual, but it's basically like a website where professors submit lectures of many different disciplines. And so he actually gave me about 30 minute lectures that he had on the history of modern philosophy. And so every day I would watch like one or two of his lectures, to kind of brush up on some of the things that I probably needed to know going into the semester. And so during the summer, yeah, I basically spent most of it, getting my mind right. I was just really excited about finally doing what I'm passionate about doing. And throughout the semester, I've kept that level of excitement, and I'm feeling the same way going into this next semester. So it was really, really nice to get basically what I was expecting from my first semester. And I think getting ready mentally really helped me, start to get in that mode, in that academic mode. So yeah, that was basically what I did during the summer. Lots
Cool.
of preparation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. You should definitely send me the link to all those lectures like after this, because that sounds valuable. Um,
Absolutely.
so what classes did you take this semester?
Yeah, so I took a class with Professor Casey, on thinking, feeling, and voicing in public art.
Mhm.
I took a class with Professor Harvey, Robert Harvey, on the Sublime, and I took a class with Professor Craig on Levinas. So that was my all-star lineup this semester.
So the class with Professor Casey and the one with Professor Harvey, those were master's courses, but the one with Professor Craig, that was a doctoral course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Just
both two of them were in Brooklyn for the most part, at least. There were some weeks where we had to be virtual, given the happenings of today. But most of actually all of the classes for Professor Craig were on the Stony Brook campus. So every Wednesday I would have to commute a total of 6 hours to get to that class, which was definitely new to me. But I think in retrospect, it was definitely worth it because it ended up being probably one of my favorite classes that I've ever taken, not just in the program, but in undergrad as well.
mhm. Yeah, it's about, if you take the LIRR, it's about like a 3 hour one way transit, like especially if you have like some subway before. So it's manageable, and you can a train's slightly different than a subway because you can do some work on there if you need to. You can more easily read. There's like less, you don't have to move around as much. You could get some writing done. I know that Professor Craig herself commutes from Connecticut, I think.
Yeah.
And she has a routine where she works on the whole commute. But Levinas is one of her specialties, so I'm sure that was just incredible.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. So I'd like for you to focus on one of these courses and talk more about it in particular. Which course would you like to speak in depth on?
Um, let's go with the Levinas course with
Cool.
Professor Craig, because I actually really, well, I enjoyed all my classes, obviously, and I think I got something very valuable and unique from each one of those classes. But I really enjoyed Professor Craig's style of teaching, and so it would be nice to maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, and she's so central to the MA program. Like she was the director of it for a while. Um, she's probably the professor I've had the most courses with at Stony Brook. And yeah, her style of teaching is really democratic and very um, tactful, with like an emphasis on making sure that everybody understands the material. I've
Mm.
definitely learned a lot about how I would teach a course based on being in her courses. Like really phenomenal. Yeah.
Is it plagiarism if I do the exact same thing years later? I'm
No,
just kidding.
it's just
But
it's best practices. It's not plagiarism.
right.
um, so what was the structure of that class like? The structure of the class and the work. How did you like? What was it like?
Yeah, so because you've taken so many classes with her, what I will say will probably ring a bell.
Mhm.
But basically, we would start off every class with a look back at the material that we covered the previous week. And honestly, I thought that was probably the most helpful thing about the class, because it's one thing to go over the material once, but it's another to go over it twice and to get sort of even more clarity now that you've already read it and had discussion. Um, it always, it allowed everything to stay fresh in my mind,
Mhm.
and it allowed, I guess, just a more lucid understanding of the material. The fact that she was able to, bring it back and just review some of the material that may have been confusing the first time around. Um, so yeah, she would always start off with that, with a look back, and that would take anywhere from as short as 10 minutes and sometimes even as long as half an hour, depending on how depending on the needs of the class. And then after that, what we would do is we would basically have a little fun writing prompt.
Mhm.
I don't know if she ever did those with you, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, those are usually meant for transitioning into what we were going to talk about in class on that day. And a lot of them were just like really fun, kind of like diurnal prompts about our everyday lives that had something to do with the material that we were going to cover. And I just thought that those are really fun. And for me in particular, it was really helpful because, as I said, it had been a while since I've been in a classroom. And so I felt like gradually with those prompts, with those small writing assignments, I kind of hit my stride as a writer and started to, kind of use better sentence structures and language, and just my technique overall in terms of writing improved. And I think it was in large part due to those very small prompts that she would give us. Um, and so, yeah, I thought that was phenomenal and very helpful, I think, for me and probably for the class as well. And then after that, we would basically, just dive into the material, talk about some of the important things. She would always write up important terms on the board, which again, I thought was really helpful, because especially when reading Levinas, there's a lot, there's an abundance of terms that are just really important to his philosophy. And so the fact that she took time to write them out on the board and identify those terms was just really helpful to kind of organize our thinking, and just organize the way that we understood Levinas. And so that was just extremely helpful for us. Usually after we discussed and went over the material, we would have a presentation. We all were required to give one 15 to 20-minute presentation on the material for that day. And that was extremely helpful because obviously we got to get into dialogue with our classmates. And I think that's always really important. In many of the classes that I've been involved in my life, a lot of the things that I've learned came from my classmates, came from different perspectives that I've heard from different classmates. And so having that presentation and then discussion amongst ourselves after that, which is really helpful in, I guess, igniting like new ideas and, taking a look at different perspectives from different students. And that was basically the key to why I enjoyed the class so much, was because it was so engaging.
Mhm.
Obviously in any upper level course, you're going to have a lot of lecturing. That's always going to be a necessity. But I think the way that she balanced lectures and interaction among students, among classmates, was just perfect. It allowed me to get a lot, not just from what she had to say, but from what my classmates had to say. And so, yeah, that was basically the structure of the class. It was really, really helpful, really, really fun. It never got old, it never got bland. I felt like there was always something new going on, whether it was a perspective or, with the writing prompts. It just kept the class really fresh, and just really fun to attend, honestly. So, yeah, shout out to Professor Craig for that experience.
Yeah, I really enjoyed, the structure she has. I like the way that my experience of, I haven't taken any doctoral courses with her, but my experience in the master's program, and I don't know if there is more lecturing when you're at the doctoral level, but the way the function served by the recap has, the pattern I've seen is that it's more of a lecture. Like there's not, students don't usually speak up during that point, right? And so what'll happen so like, yeah, like you're saying, you start off with the recap and then you have a writing prompt. And then typically, well, she'd have the terms up on a board, on a chalkboard and she'd have that done by the time either in the first 10 minutes of class or before class started.
Right.
And then we'd go straight into the presentation, and usually we'd have that before the break, and then we'd have a break, and then we'd use the presentation as a jumping off point for the discussion. And she always has us write down 2 or 3 questions at the end of the presentation that to give the student really some decision-making power in deciding or determining where they want the emphasis in this text and discussion to be. Like, what did they find was important? Where do they want to direct the text? Says one thing, but maybe there are certain implications that the student presenting really thinks are politically important or sociopolitically important. And
Right.
they have the power to say, like, we want to focus on these things. Like whatever the questions may be, it's really the student's responsibility to come up with those questions. Some students would weave them into the presentation itself. Others would just have the presentation the way it is, and then the questions would be additions at the end. And then from there, during the discussion, she often would, and this is a credit to her wisdom, she would not make her presence larger than it needed to be, which is to say that she mostly mediated, wrote down like who wants to speak. She had a list in order of like this, a queue. She had a queue for who had something to say, and we'd go in turn. And oftentimes that would generate basically 2 or 3 different discussions we had going on. And so you get your turn, you'd be like, okay, well, I want to respond to this person who we've already, I know I want to go back to this thing that we've already kind of branched off from with the last person here in the queue. But yeah, and she'd really only kind of step in and say something whenever there was a misfocus, so to speak, or misrepresentation of the work that she really needed to clarify from an authoritative perspective that is very informed. And she was always ready to do that. And so you can presume that she had that the whole time. But for everything we were talking about, she had like a very informed opinion, but she was letting us work through it and engage with the material ourselves and build, and like kind of in a Heideggerian way, build up our own direct understanding of what was going on.
Mm.
And also she was just so like open to our own perspective in the sense that she really valued what we had to say. Like her perspective was constantly changing, and she was very interested, genuinely interested in the new threads that our ideas were opening up.
Yeah.
So the way that that's all to say that the material for a given day happened in the last 2/3 of class, and it wasn't as like comprehensive as a lecture might have been, because
Right.
it took the shape that we wanted it to take, and it was very organic in that sense. And then from there, the recap the following week tended to serve the function of, she'd say, well, so and so brought our attention to this and really emphasized this. But then that's also when she'd take the opportunity to hit on the points that she thought were like important to a holistic understanding of the reading that we maybe didn't get to cover because of the organic nature of the discussion in the previous week. So it was a recap, but it was also what you typically consider a lecture, in the sense
Yeah.
of it did get to cover material that we barely mentioned. And we'd close each class with her jotting down like, what do we want to talk about more in next week? Like, what are your
Yep.
continuing concerns? And she'd really do a great job of like connecting the thread throughout the entire semester of like, we've been focusing on this, and we've been
Yeah.
continuing to hit on these ideas and try to interrogate them. So yeah, she did an excellent job of mediating a discussion amongst a lot of people.
Yeah. She kept everything connected very
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Kept everything connected very well. And she allowed the students to basically dictate discussion, which I really appreciated because as you pointed out, a lot of times we would talk about a particular subject and then someone would bring something else up. And then, without too much deviation, we would start to focus on something else that was important to what we were reading. And so she would usually, pick up on the questions at the end of class, any lingering issues, and then would bring it up, during the recap of the next class. So yeah, she just did a fantastic job, honestly, keeping everything connected, keeping everything organized, and also just the way that she tends to explain things. It's just very lucid and very easy to understand. And just the whole dynamic of the class, like the overall energy that resulted from that approach, I think was just really valuable and was just so conducive to a learning environment, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned how lucid her explanations are, because I think you reminded me that she definitely has like an acute and keen sense of the inner workings of somebody else in a conversation, right? Like she really is paying attention and understands what the other person is thinking. Even if they're not saying all those things, she really can like piece together their perspective, probably in like intuitive identification. And from there, she can identify, it's not even that she identifies like what the person is missing, right? She does that internally, and then from there also identifies how to lead the person there. Like, I remember one of my presentations, I wasn't quite getting, there were two readings together and I wasn't quite piecing them together the right way. And there was just like this moment at the end of class where it finally clicked, and I was like, I was speechless. It was the last class of the semester. And I was just like,
Class?
it was the last class of the semester. Yeah. It was,
Okay, so your presentation was the last presentation of the
yeah.
semester.
Yeah, it was on Bergson's Introduction to Metaphysics and Deleuze's Pure Eminence of Life. And it
Mm,
was the piece that I wasn't getting was that the intuition of concrete duration runs through everything. Like I was getting the self to self connection. I wasn't getting like that kind of jaw dropping moment of like, oh, that's everyone and that's everything. Hi. It was like awakening. It was like, hi, everybody. I'm here now. Like,
uh, no, she has it just a really amazing way of just allowing one, or I guess pushing someone to put it all together, if that makes any sense. My presentation, it wasn't the last presentation of the semester, but I was actually also doing it on two different readings, on Descartes and then on the weekly Levinas reading. And so I remember I was during our office hours before the presentation, I just remember how different it was prior to that meeting and then after that meeting, how she just made everything make sense, you know?
yeah.
And that's just a testament to just how good she is at keeping herself organized. Like she always has the big picture sort of in the back of her mind, and then everything else she does is she never forgets the big picture. You know, she always keeps the big picture there. And that kind of allows her, in my opinion, to stay grounded and to stay just super organized. And I feel like that was one of my problems going into that presentation, is that I sometimes would lose sight of the bigger picture. And as a result, would sometimes lose myself a little bit when in my explanations, because um, things weren't as organized and connected as they should have been. But once I got done with that meeting, it just all clicked. And by the time I had my presentation, I felt so much more comfortable than I did beforehand. So yeah, I'm actually also taking a class with her this upcoming semester. It's going to be a master's class,
Yeah,
a
working on
master's course.
aesthetics.
So, yeah, are you going to be in it?
Yeah, I am.
Oh
I'm
yeah, it's
excited.
gonna be a fun one. And to be honest, by the way, you did mention whether it was different at the doctoral level. I looked at her syllabus and it looked pretty similar to the Levinas syllabus in terms of just the things that are going to be required for the class. So I don't think there's too much of a difference, honestly.
Okay.
Again, I've yet to take the course, so I'll let you know once I have that experience. But from the looks of the syllabus, they look pretty similar to what she requires of you on the PhD level as well.
Cool. Yeah. She does a lot of advising too for doctoral students, even though
Mm,
she mostly focuses on master's courses. I don't even, she might do some undergrad courses too. I can't quite
not
know.
sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I know she definitely has like she's very interested in helping people and helping philosophers become better philosophers, like at every
Mm,
level. There's a lot of virtue there.
yeah,
Okay, so moving on, because we could, I mean, I've had a lot of
talk about
classes.
different days.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of virtuous things to be said about her skill.
Mm.
Were there any seminar discussions that were particularly memorable for you?
Yeah, it was actually the very first discussion that we had, or technically the second, because first week is syllabus week and we didn't really get into the reading all that much. But the first real discussion that we had was actually something that stuck with me throughout the whole semester. And just to give I'm not gonna give a lecture on Levinas right now. That's the least of my concerns. But just I guess so that you have an understanding, and everyone watching has an understanding of what Levinas is about. His goal is basically to prioritize the alterity of the other, right? The otherness of the other. And the way he does that is by creating distance between myself and the other. And the point of that is for me to not have the ability to basically conquer the other, right? To impose my will on the other. Because if there's a distance there, then it would not allow me the ability to impose myself on the other. So Levinas is very adamant on there being a level of distance between myself and the other. And then obviously there's still an ethical response that the other kind of ignites within me, but that's done without any kind of any kind of like connection, any kind of grasp, right? There's no grasping the other for Levinas. And that's one of his core beliefs in his philosophy. And I remember one of my classmates brought up the fact that a lot of times when we do have interactions with other people, part of the impact that someone else may have on me is due to that kind of grasp that we're able to have, or that kind of connection that we're able to have with another person. You know, the saying goes, they touched my heart, you know, or they touched my spirit. And that was one of the, I guess, that was one of the disagreements that she had with Levinas' philosophy, is that it didn't allow there to be any of that connection, which would usually result for her as opening up her mind to many other different perspectives and many other different things, you know? So throughout the semester, I was basically trying to find the balance between allowing there to be some kind of connection with another person, because I know that that kind of connection exists, but also trying to have that connection without imposing my will on another person, because then that would just be, you know, that would reduce the other to just, you know, it wouldn't value the alterity of the other if I were to just impose my will and try to conquer you know, another human being, another subject. So throughout the semester, it was crazy how it came up, you know, very first discussion that we had. But I think it was really helpful in my overall thinking about Levinas, and also in the final paper that that I ended up writing for the class. And it was something that I always came back to every week, because it's such a core thing in his philosophy. And, you know, just trying to grapple against that was just really exciting, honestly, throughout the semester. And I definitely learned a lot from that perspective, and, you know, doing more research on how I can sort of balance the dichotomy between the distance and the connection.
You see that? Yeah, that's really great. I'm really glad we're talking about this. You see that same distinction in Bergson with qualitative heterogeneity between the unity and the multiplicity of concrete duration, right?
Right.
There is the connection, there is the unity, but there's also the multiplicity, the difference, the radical multiplicity, the radical difference. And I mean, also, like when you talk about connection, like so when you talk about like they touched whatever, they touched my spirit, they touched my mind, they changed me in some way, or like for me in my work, that sounds more like resonance and more like analysis, which is to say that like from the plurality or the multiplicity or the polyvalence of a given statement or experience, you only get one valence of it, or one set of valences. What you've already, unless you're doing intuition, you only get what you already have intuited. You only understand through analysis what you've already intuited. And I think if you really want to like be productive about it, then you have to practice intuition, which is not linking it to a different concept you already have, and it's really getting outside of language and moving into feeling, moving into, Bergson calls it a sympathetic dilation of the mind, which is kind of like an experience of becoming other, becoming outside oneself. And I think if you can learn to turn yourself into the whole, to try to, what Bergson calls an expansion of consciousness through a procession of continual intuitions and dilations of the mind, then you start to identify with the whole qualitative heterogeneity, which is not just my qualitative heterogeneity, right? It's everything. If you get out of the ego and move into the whole, then I think you can identify and have that connection without it being conquering. You have no desire to conquer. You're just as much the other as, you're not trying to reduce them to you. It's not the narcissism that tries to make them like you. And that definitely involves a practice of listening more and speaking less. And not reducing. It's strange to do philosophical research this way, because you don't want to, like what I'm saying here about Levinas and Bergson, like, yes, you can note the connection, but if I say that Levinas is just like Bergson, then I'm already reducing Levinas to Bergson, and they're different in meaningful ways. So you have to do philosophical research, you have to see the fecundity between thinkers while never identifying the two. They're not identical. They're radically different, but at the same time, we can get at something running between them all, something consistent that is common to all experience.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's one of Levinas's goals, obviously, is to not reduce the other to the same. It's just the language that he uses makes it hard sometimes for there to be, it makes it hard to allow for a lot of the closure that happens when you are in interaction, when you're interacting with other people, or when you get close to other people, when you're in relationship with other people. And so it's just, I guess it's easier to think about, but it's a lot harder to put into writing what it would need to be required to maintain that connection without allowing for one to conquer the other, without allowing for reduction, essentially. And I guess trying to find those avenues in his writing was just really, really fun for me throughout the semester. And, it opened up my mind to a lot of other things as well that, we'll probably discuss at some other points in our friendship.
Yeah, I think a rigor is sharing the fire is probably working at this intersection that you're interested in.
Yeah, you said Irigore?
Yeah, what did y'all read? Well, her most recent, her 2019 book, Sharing the Fire, Outlining a Dialectics of Sensitivity. She talks about this oscillation between going into oneself to allow space for the other to become their full to be. But also, making it like coming together with someone to make a home.
Yeah. So we actually also read Bergson. We read his article on duration in conjunction with, I think, the chapter that he had on time, that Levinas had on time. Read Irigore, we read Descartes, as I've previously mentioned, the first three meditations in conjunction with his idea on the infinity.
Yeah. And that's where I would put intuition too, right? The cogito and intuition, I guess infinity too, is like that ineffable thing inside us.
Right. And I think that the point was also that the infinity for Levinas, just as God for Descartes, come from the outside. It's not something that we're necessarily born with, because as you probably have read the Descartes' first three meditations.
Yeah, I've written on
Yeah,
it, yeah.
actually, part of the reason I ended up presenting on that particular topic is because I've read Descartes so much, and I've never had to do a presentation on Descartes, that I figured that, you know, at some point in my life I have to present on Descartes, given how many times I've read the first 3 meditations. But that was also another skill that Professor Craig had, in my opinion, is she was able to direct us to other thinkers, and just did a great way of putting everything together in conjunction with what we had to read for Levinas for that given week. So yeah.
Yeah. I took in undergrad, I took like a whole, like a intensive seminar on the meditations. Like we read the meditations like 3 times
Yeah.
in one semester, first by itself and then with associated readings each week. And I wrote a paper on the first 3 meditations that basically said that like Descartes uses the experience, the raw experience of clarity and distinctness to justify the concept of clarity and distinctness. Like he starts with clarity and distinctness in the cogito, goes through God, and goes back to clarity and distinctness, the Cartesian circle, right? And the reason it's not a circular line of reasoning is because in the first instance, it's about, or across the whole picture, it's about verifying all experiences of clarity and distinctness with a present experience of clarity and distinctness, like a phenomenological kind of justifier. So I don't know. Not sure how relevant that was.
Everything philosophical is relevant. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, like maybe it'll, I don't know, it's an unpublished idea, so I like sharing those whenever possible because they can produce further research and insights. So you presented on Descartes, and was Bergson part of that too? That week you said?
So it was no. So it was on Descartes and a section on Levinas on enjoyment.
Enjoyment.
Enjoyment, yeah, jouissance. And it was basically, yeah. It was basically just giving an overview of, I split up my presentation like 50-50. I spent the first half speaking on Descartes and basically summarizing the first 3 meditations. And then I spent the second half trying to explain the chapter on Levinas. And then towards the end, I kind of made a connection between the infinity in Levinas and God in Descartes. And then obviously the discussion questions you have at the end of every presentation. But yeah, honestly, I wanted to have a presentation earlier in the semester as opposed to later, because again, it had been so long since I've been in that classroom setting. So I kind of wanted to, to get the ball rolling as quickly as I could. But also I was just very familiar with Descartes and not too familiar with Levinas. So I wanted to have a little bit of a balance there, between something that I've had experience with and something that or a thinker that I didn't have too much experience with. And again, it was really helpful to have Professor Craig's input before that presentation. Obviously, it was like night and day. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have that meeting. God knows how that presentation would have gone. But yeah, it was helpful to have her obviously there to give me her insights. And I think it was a very valuable for me to go through that presentation. Also, so I don't know how you usually go about your presentations, but for me, it actually helps when I don't have, so we were required to write something up, obviously, like an 8 to 10 page, paper on the presentation. So there was that. And obviously I handed out my essay to all the classmates for them to have as a resource down the line. But usually when I present, I don't have, so I have an outline, like a very general outline of topics that I feel the need to discuss, but I never read from like a paper or an essay, because I feel like that actually works against me. Oftentimes what would happen is during a presentation, spontaneous things would come up sometimes. And whenever those spontaneous things would come up and I am reading from a paper, it would kind of, it would cause me to lose track of what it is that I'm doing at the moment. And in order to avoid that, I tend to just kind of, have like a very general outline and just talk as if it were just like a regular conversation. So the bad thing, or the potential consequence to that, is that usually you lose track of time easier when
Yeah.
you're not reading from, from an essay that you wrote. It's a lot easier to manage time when you've already read it and know how long it takes to read it. Whenever you're kind of freestyling and things come up on the fly, you kind of lose track of time sometimes. And I know that's one of the things Professor Craig warned me about, because I told her what my approach was going to be. And she just told me, yeah, that's fine. Just, keep track of time, make sure you're aware of how, of what the time is whenever you're presenting, because we tend to kind of lose track of that a little bit. But yeah, it was really helpful for me to kind of approach it the way that I wanted to approach it. And I felt that it was very kind of her to allow me to, do the presentation in the style that I am most comfortable giving presentations. So yeah, I thought it was a good, good discussion amongst my classmates.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So you hit on the point that I was going to say, which is like whenever I do that, I get through like a tenth of the material before I realize that the time is up. And that's been a theme since undergrad, really. Like I
When you
actually,
present in general, or
no, from an outline, when I present from an outline,
yeah.
I, so, and so instead, and I tend to be more articulate when I'm writing. I actually tend to write, so I create an outline. When the way I write is I create an outline of the structure of the text. Basically whatever has stuck out to me. And then it's not like a numbered outline, it's like a section outline, and then like just phrases. And if it's part of the same paragraph, they don't have a line break, or they have a line break, but they don't have a blank line between them. If it's a new paragraph, they'll have a blank line. So like separate ideas are grouped together that way. And then I just start from the top and write, trying to explain these different things in sequence. And usually early on, I'll hit some kind of flow or stride, and then it just flows from there. And I don't really edit too much after it's been written. And that's actually why, like, it's probably easier for me to write a new paper with new ideas than it is for me to edit new ideas into an old paper.
Yeah.
Because like they weave together naturally, like from the inside. Like I don't have to like try to do it logically. It's very intuitive for me.
Right.
And it tends to be that what I write is like easy to understand for people. And then and I've read it enough times prior to presenting it that I've already added in anything that, like, my brain will tell me, like, or my mind will say that, like, we'll add words as I'm reading if there's new words to add. Like, so like you're talking about getting new ideas when you're giving the presentation. Well, I've read it enough times that my brain doesn't, when I stop editing once that stops happening. And so when I present, I'm usually also kind of anxious about what I'm reading. So like it doesn't happen in the classroom setting. I'm just like, just reading, just like very much in the act of reading.
Yeah.
So
Honestly,
it's very different from your experience.
No, yeah, it is different, but in some ways it's similar as well, because I also find myself, um, I would read my paper, right, in front of my classmates, and then I may end up reading a sentence to myself and then having sort of other ideas and opinions about that sentence, and I'm forced to take those new ideas and new opinions and kind of just, put them aside, not mention them or talk about them because I have to get through the paper. And so that whole experience to me is just not, it's not really helpful for me. Like I'd rather, I know you never want to go on tangents and you want to stay focused on the material. But I don't like I like letting those ideas loose, and mentioning those things, because I feel like um, it plays a role in the overall flow of the conversation. And when I'm just reading from a paper, I just don't feel like I'm present when I'm trying to discuss what I want to discuss. And also like other nonverbal forms of communication, like making eye contact and seeing the expressions in my classmates' faces whenever I make an assertion. It's just always helpful to me because it gives me an idea of how my assertions are coming across to my classmates. Do they understand what I'm talking about? Like sometimes you can see that from someone's facial expression. Do I need to be a little bit more clear? Do I need to say what I just said in a different way so that it can become more lucid for the audience? Like these are all things that I feel unable to do when I'm just reading from my paper, because the goal is to just get through it in the allotted time. But when I'm able to see people's faces and their expressions, nods and all these other sort of nonverbal forms of communication, it makes me more comfortable, believe it or not. It makes me more comfortable because I feel like um, I'm getting signals from my classmates and from the professors that will dictate how I present the information given, if that
Yep.
makes any sense. So, and that's how I've done all my presentations for Professor Casey and for Professor Harvey. That's usually the rubric that I use. I come in with a very general outline of things that I wanna cover, and maybe if I have some quotes, I would have them there, because obviously I'm not gonna memorize. Yeah, on page 276, bottom of the third paragraph, I'm not going to memorize all of those quotes. So I would usually have them written up. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just very comfortable for me to have that style of presenting. And I feel like it's more fun too, having that kind of interaction instead of just reading. Like sometimes again, we all have different ways of presenting. So,
Hmm.
for those who prefer to read, definitely there's a lot of value in that as well. And I agree with you in that I feel like I do tend to articulate myself a little better when I'm reading, because it's already written down, and um, I don't need to come up with certain ways of expressing myself on the spot. And sometimes it can be helpful to have that already set in stone. But I just don't feel comfortable doing that. I feel so out of place. I feel like I'm not even there sometimes. So
Yeah. I I like so one thing I like about the extemporaneous flow is that it really honors like the process. It makes the process of thinking, of doing philosophy, transparent. And um, the tangents, they're just, it doesn't, the editing and selection, they can be really great for a succinct product. But whenever possible, I like to demystify things, and to like show the human um, aspect of doing philosophy, like make
yeah,
it, you know, like I like to yank the philosopher out of their ivory tower and show everybody else that they're on the ground with them. Um,
absolutely.
and that being said, as an introvert, I feel like my most natural self is very hard to articulate in anything but writing.
Mm,
And as an artist, I feel like there are certain aspects of myself that are inarticulable in writing and only articulable through other forms of expression, aesthetic expression. Um, so yes, that's my response, but we need to progress with the structure of the interview. This is really fascinating and great. And I can just see that we would keep going deeper and more like thorough, thick, local depth in this idea and all these ideas. But we need to go forward. So
yeah.
I wanted to talk about your term paper for the Levinas class and how it was a development. I wanted to ask you in which ways it was a development on your interests that we already had coming into Stony Brook.
Mm, yeah. So my term paper for Levinas was a combination of things that I've read about in the past before and things that I may not have felt comfortable both thinking and writing about previously. So the paper was on language and consciousness in Mead and Levinas. I don't know if you're familiar with George Herbert Mead, but he's a social psychologist, and he has
Mm,
this whole he has a book, like one of the most honestly spectacular books I've ever read on language and consciousness and how the human being develops consciousness throughout their lives. And so I kind of put that in conjunction with Levinas' approach to language, and then the kind of like the plot twist, or not the plot twist, but um, the unique aspect of the paper, in my opinion, was the implications that that had for animal ethics. And that's
mm,
something that I've never really done too much research in. And that's part of the reason why I chose that topic, is because I didn't want to write about something that I've already written about in the past, or, obviously Levinas in itself was new to me. Mead wasn't, but Levinas was. And so that aspect was novel to me in a sense already. But I really wanted to dive into animal ethics and see what I could kind of come up with in conjunction with what I've read about language and consciousness and Mead and Levinas. So yeah, that was basically the paper. Um, it was I learned even more about what I had previously known in Mead's philosophy, and obviously in Levinas's philosophy, but it was particularly insightful for me to read on animal ethics, and not just the implications that Levinas philosophy has on animal ethics, but on just Western philosophy in general, because as you probably know, most of in the history of philosophy, we do tend to prioritize the human being as the center of the world. Like everything is
mhm,
always in terms of the human being when we talk about consciousness, language, free will, ethics, whatever it is that you can come up with. It's usually on the perspective of the human being. And so it was just really interesting for me to dive into animal ethics and how I can kind of not necessarily change, but alter my thinking in order to include other animals. And I hesitate to say other animals because I feel like it doesn't do justice to the vast differences between other animals like dogs and cats and etc. So I wanna respect the alterity of other animals, addressing them respectfully. But yeah, it was really insightful for me to do the research and to formulate an argument that would help um, for the inclusion of other animals in Levinas's ethics. And I think it's also particularly important in the society we live in today, because there's a lot going on right now concerning animal ethics and the mistreatment of animals. And I think a lot of that is due to just our perception and our overall, I guess, perspective on how we tend to be on a higher hierarchical
Yeah.
level than other animals. And I think it can be very detrimental to how we treat animals if we continue to, go through our lives with that mindset. So it was really fun to write that paper, and it was also, I think, very helpful, just for me, but also I think it's something that I can definitely research further in the future. And
Yeah.
it's definitely not something that I thought about. I never thought that I would get into this prior to this class, so I was happy about that.
Yeah. In undergrad, I took environmental ethics,
Mm,
and two perspectives that you reminded me of were deep ecology, which is a development out of Spinoza's nature, which is really it's taking Spinoza's critique of anthropocentrism and anthropomorphism. God has been anthropomorphized, but then also the human ethics is typically very anthropocentric. It takes it and decentralizes it, but also ecofeminism, um, which I personally like to link ecofeminism with anarcho-feminism, because both take a sort of anti-hierarchical approach to,
mm.
well, on the one hand, humans in anarcho-feminism, but then ecofeminism will develop that anti-hierarchical model. David Wood has this community, Yellowbird. I believe that's what it's called. I think it's in Tennessee. And I don't quite know how he does it, but he gives the animals in this community, in this nature reserve community, are a demos. They somehow get a say, I guess, in what happens. Like it's a sort of political ecosystem for all the animals. He also does artist retreats. Like he has people that come in and make art on the land. It's just, I don't know why I thought of that. It's interesting. So yes, if you're going to develop this research, take a look at ecofeminism, deep ecology. I forget, there's like one person at the head of the deep ecology school that I forget who it is. I can send you papers later.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Send them my way.
Yeah, and it's really cool. Yeah, your research sounds really cool. I don't have too much to say about it in particular, just that I don't know. I also like to work at language, and especially like qualitative languages.
Mm. Yeah,
Uh,
I was gonna say I've always had an interest in further investigating consciousness and language and how they develop. But again, the whole field of animal ethics has been something really foreign to me up
yeah,
until that point. So diving into that was just very interesting to me, and I think it can be just helpful for the community going forward if I'm able to continue to research that particular topic. But yeah, language and consciousness, particularly in Mead, existential philosophy, phenomenology, and recently Wittgenstein. I think I told you about that. That actually came as a result of the lectures that I told you my professor sent me. I never had too much knowledge or exposure to Wittgenstein until those lectures that he sent me, and
mm,
that's when I started to get into it. And luckily, I'm actually taking a course on Wittgenstein with Cormier this
mhm.
upcoming semester. I'm really excited about that. Um, so
I always thought it was hilarious that Wittgenstein wrote a book in his 20, I think it was in his 20s, and then was a carpenter for like decades, thinking that he had solved philosophy. Like,
you
what? Like, how do you? What kind of hubris? Like, I don't.
listen. I mean, his parents pressured him to doing something he didn't really have any passion in.
Mm,
So he kind of his parents were very adamant on him taking over their business. And he was actually quite good at it as well. So,
Was that the
you know,
carpentry? Was their business?
so it was aerodynamics.
Oh, okay.
So it was aerodynamics. And so he got into that early in his career, early in his life. But he always felt that he had like a void. And then he read Bertrand, he read some Bertrand Russell, and all of a sudden, you know, that's when it all, that's when the little light bulb lit up in his very confusing and ambiguous brain. And that's when he started to get into philosophy. But yeah, I'm very excited to be taking that course with Professor Cormier. I think I'm very lucky because this is a new interest of mine, and so I was very happy and excited and lucky to find out that there is a class offered this semester on Wittgenstein. It's almost like somebody's looking at my life and writing things up for me to fall into place perfectly, at least, you know, academically, because a lot of my interests align with a lot of the classes being offered, which is amazing. Same with philosophy of science with Professor Kreese.
Yeah.
I've always been into, I think I've talked to you about it in previous conversations, but I'm very interested in how science and philosophy sort of intersect, particularly quantum mechanics and neuroscience.
Yeah.
And so I'm very curious what that class will entail. And I think I'll be able to learn a lot from that class. The professor who sent me the lectures is also sort of like into that intersection between physics, neuroscience, and philosophy. And that's kind of what got me into it a little bit. So I'll be very happy to be diving into all these different fields this upcoming semester. I think I have another all-star lineup, by the way. It's just all-star lineup after all-star lineup. I love it.
Yeah, that's great. No, I definitely feel like I've been seeing more of those patterns myself lately of like this. You know, I think that's when you can, I think that's when you're in the right flow. There's lots of flows going on in this world, and when you're in the right one that harmonizes well with who you are and achieving the natural conclusions to the trajectory you've been on, then things seem to really start to be lining up. But I also wonder, a lot of times lately, I've wondered how the role that, like, if there is some kind of like I wonder if consciousness plays a generative role in material. Like for Spinoza, mind and material happen kind of simultaneously. Existence and essence are entangled with each other. And so we typically think that material follows the laws of physics, but I wonder, as an open-minded question, what kind of reciprocal role, especially now that we know more about quantum instability and quantum indeterminacy, you know, what role does a life play in generating the material necessities? What role does a life play in actualizing certain topologies? Yeah.
Spinoza is very central in terms of your research interests, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my work has had like a really big emphasis on historicity and effective necessity.
Right.
The way that experiences inscribe upon a body, and then express themselves in certain ways in new events. That's just, I don't know what it is. I don't know why I think he got it right, but I do.
Have you read any Whitehead by any chance? Why do you make that face expression?
because I feel like I've been not avoiding Whitehead, but he's been daunting. Like I've read the SEP, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on Whitehead. I love the idea of pantheoning. I tend to be very attracted to philosophical systems that are surprising and kind of like, oh, that's somebody got away with saying that. Like,
Somehow, right?
yeah.
Like, are you more impressed with what they actually said or with the fact that they got away with saying that kind of thing, huh? um,
Well, I guess so. I mean, I don't know how much those two things are different. If I have a certain kind of, I think it's mostly about the way that it shows me how I could be more than what I am right now, not limited to the contemporary discourse or limited to the dominant conception of the way things are in this world, but um, it gives me a precedent to push my own thinking instead of needing to uh,
assimilate to
yeah,
standard ways of thinking. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Whitehead is at the forefront of that, by the way. I don't know if you've read anything about his process philosophy, but it's I'm still grappling amongst some of his ideas and just the way that he structures his overall metaphysics. But I thought it's something that you might be interested in because he tries to basically create a metaphysics that aligns with the quantum mechanics of his time. And the way he does that is just, in my opinion, just really interesting and brilliant. And it can be a chore to read through, especially if you're just, reading it just straight up without any guide, without any professors to kind of guide you towards some of his terminologies and whatnot. But
mhm.
yeah, I definitely think at some point you should definitely look into Whitehead a little bit. I think you'll be, both perplexed and amazed by some of the things that he has to say, and it might end up being important for your own personal line of work. So I can also send you some some resources via email or text to kind of direct you towards what I think would be really interesting for you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Like I can feel myself like I had a little,
Gravity towards
I had like a little bit of like a lull in my busyness right now. Like I've got a lot of things going on, but I had kind of lost like during the application cycle, I really was pushing myself, right? And I've had a little bit of a rest, and now I can feel myself getting that same kind of interest and excitement about these new ideas. And I can already see myself like really just pouring over these texts. Like they're like this is the part of philosophy I live for, is like that drive to figure it out and to be pushed and challenged. And I think Levinas is going to do that too. I know that Ed is actually like really well versed in Whitehead. Um,
what is Ed not well versed in? Is the real question. What is he not well versed in? Oh man, he is well versed in many things. Um, it's actually, it amazes me sometimes, the kind of just how much knowledge he has on how
yeah,
many, all these different disciplines. And I think his class was also, um, I love the structure of his class because he brought in so many different um, perspectives and disciplines that really opened up my mind to, thinking of different things in different ways. And it's just a testament to how much knowledge Professor Casey has on so many different things. Um, I find it very difficult for anyone to come up with any topic of discussion that he won't have at least some level of knowledge in. So yeah, but I didn't know that he had necessarily like profound interest or knowledge in Whitehead. So maybe I'll talk to him about it.
I think
down the line.
maybe, I think it was something like his dissertation was on Whitehead or something.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
I don't remember exactly. I think he's mentioned it in a class I had with him before. I just know that like I can mention Whitehead to him and he'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, and so that, tells me that I learned at some point that he had expertise in Whitehead. Um, he's also typically pretty open-minded to things that aren't like thinkers. Just he's open-minded to any form of thinking and discourse.
Yeah.
That isn't constrained to philosophy, qua philosophy, and it's all of its modern trappings.
No, yeah. I would say the same. And I think that's kind of the approach that I want to take in just my intellectual development. I don't want to be, again, I know it's important to be narrow to a certain extent, especially when it comes to the practical purposes of writing a dissertation and writing a particular essay on a particular topic. But I really do want to stay open-minded. I think one of the reasons I came to Stony Brook was because they actually offer you the option to even take classes in other fields.
Yeah, you can
After
take
a
up to
certain,
two.
yeah. After a certain amount of time in the program, I think they allow you to take courses in different fields. And do you know by any chance Daniel
Yeah,
Apadula?
yeah.
Yeah, so we actually went to high school and college together.
Really?
Um,
Okay. Yeah, he's in my cohort. I do know
yeah,
him.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
pretty good friends with him. I just haven't talked to him lately. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. We went to Regis together in high school, and we went to College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts together. So he was actually the first person that I reached out to when the application process came to be. And one of the things that he told me was that it was very helpful for him to be able to take classes in other departments because it allowed him to just he didn't necessarily have it all put together when he came into the program, and having the ability to venture out into different avenues helped them put everything together. And I
he's
think I go ahead.
he took music classes, right?
Yeah, he took music classes.
Yeah,
um, and I find that to be like really cool that they allow you to do that.
yeah.
um,
You can even audit. Like you can take them for credit, do graduate courses in other departments for credit. But like professors at Stony Brook are very gracious. You can audit pretty much whatever you have time for, whatever
right.
and you won't get credit for necessarily, but you also, I don't know if you have to pay an auditing fee or not, but if you want to learn, you can learn as much as you have time for.
And I don't think you have to pay an auditing fee,
Mm.
from my understanding, because a couple of classmates of mine audited the Levinas course, and I don't think they had to pay any fees. So yeah, no, the professors have been extremely gracious and understanding, and I really appreciate that. And I think it's going to go a long way in just my overall development as a student.
Yeah. Okay. We digressed again with lots of great material, lots of great, we, wow, this has been fantastic. Um, what did you do outside of the classroom? Like, what has been your experience of, I mean, so you're a born and raised New Yorker, right? Like, I
In the
mean,
Bronx.
in
Mm-hmm.
the Bronx.
In the Bronx.
Okay,
No.
just as a brief tangent, very brief. I've heard that you have to live in New York for a set amount of time before you can call yourself a New Yorker. Is this like people get kind of defensive about calling you like when I come back to New York in 2 days, you know, is that true? Do people kind of hold on to
Honestly,
that?
very similar to that discussion that we had on New Jersey.
Uh,
I don't really buy into any of that stuff. I feel like if you've been here long enough to understand the culture and understand specifically the subway system, like I feel like that's a good. once you understand the subway system, I feel like you should be proud of yourself enough to call yourself a New Yorker at that point,
Okay.
because it can be very challenging to navigate um, through the subway system in New York City. But no, I mean, if you ask me personally, as long
Yeah.
as you've had a decent amount of experience in the city, as long as you've done your part in trying to immerse yourself in that culture, trying to figure out what all these boroughs are about. And that's one thing I will say,
Mm,
that if you've spent all your time in New York, in just in Brooklyn or just in Manhattan, then I would hesitate to call you like a New Yorker. Like you need to see what's in the Bronx, you need to see what's in Queens, you need to
yeah.
see, all these different areas so that you really get just a full picture. Because
What about
that's one
Staten Island? Like that too?
okay. That's where the uh standard New York comes out, is when you mention Staten Island. I mean, sure, it wouldn't be the first it would definitely not be the first place I would recommend you go to, but um yeah, I mean, what makes New York so special is the diversity, not just
Yeah.
in terms of people, but just the music,
Mm,
the geographical location, just the overall culture is what makes it different from any other place I've been to. And you'll never really get fully immersed if you spend all your time in one borough. You need to explore. You need to get a sense of what each area has to offer, and then once you stay true to that, then I have no problems with someone calling themselves a New Yorker, even if they're not from here. So
okay.
you know what? There are actually, and again, not to further digress into this topic, but I would say there are some people I know who weren't born and raised in New York that I would call New Yorkers before some people who were born and raised in New York,
Okay.
just because we were so open-minded about getting a full overview of what it is to live in the city, that they've earned my respect. You know,
Mm,
they've earned my respect, and so um, I would definitely encourage you. And I know a lot of my classmates are also making that transition into New York City, and I've had that kind of same advice for them as well. Encouraging them to seek out all these different places and cultures, and I think it can be very valuable. And if you're going to be in New York City, you might as well immerse yourself fully in our culture, and I think
yeah.
that's very valuable.
I think so. I've got exposure to like lower and middle Manhattan, pretty much up to Times Square, and like South Brooklyn and Central Brooklyn, Prospect area, Bed-Stuy.
Right.
Um, but I don't have a lot of exposure with, I mean, some Williamsburg too. I don't have a lot of exposure, and I guess some Astoria. Astoria is Queens, isn't it? Or is,
Yeah.
yeah, so I got a
Wait.
like tiny bit of Queens, but you'll have to
Mhm.
show me, you'll have to show me the Bronx and Queens proper um, when I get back.
You know, not to continue to digress, but I find it a little sad sometimes that the Bronx is usually the last place um, people visit. I think it's because it's far from everything.
Yeah,
To be honest, it's a little bit of a hike to get up here, but definitely whenever you have some time, I'm more than glad to show you, some areas here in the Bronx. We have the botanical gardens here. We have
I
great food.
love botanic. Like every new city I go to, I want to go to the botanical gardens. Like,
It's one of my favorite places in New York City is the botanical gardens that we have here. So
wow.
um, yeah, it's amazing. And then there's Little Italy right next to it. So if you like Italian food, good pizza, good
I mean,
pasta.
this,
There's a
do you make a distinction? Like, is there, do you call any, like, I would not call any pizza in New York bad pizza. You like, if you like,
no.
I'm just wondering, does like the new, does a typical New Yorker have their own kind of hierarchy where there is good pizza and bad pizza in New York City? Because for me, coming into New York, it's like every piece of pizza I've ever had in New York City has been better than anywhere else I've ever had pizza.
Preach to the preach to the choir, especially those who live in Chicago, who are just delusional and nonsensical for some reason. But
The sauce on top, like, I mean, do
it's
you like your stuffed animals with the stuffing outside too? Like,
listen, it's a formula that truly can't be replicated elsewhere. New York pizza. So yes, we do have our hierarchy even within, within New York City. There are pizzas that are better than others, but there's New York pizza and then there's every other pizza in my eyes, at least. And I've tried.
yeah,
It's not like I've, been here my whole life and have never tried all these different kinds of pizzas. No, I've tried. I've tried from different countries, East Coast, West Coast, and I'm about ready to transition that from an opinion to a fact, honestly. Um,
yeah. How do you feel about
nah,
Two
but
Brothers?
what happened?
How do you feel about Two Brothers, the dollar slices? Is that, where is that on your hierarchy? Is that kind of low on the hierarchy? Like
For me, the $2.50 pizzas are just the epitome of good pizza, in
yeah,
my opinion.
I would agree.
Um,
And you don't need anything
yeah,
more than cheese, really.
say that again?
In my experience, you don't really need anything more than cheese. Like the $2.50 piece of pizza with a slice of cheese, like especially if they got buffalo sauce on the counter, you put some buffalo and some Parmesan. I mean, and then you take it on a plate and walk the street and continue on about your business while you eat it. Like,
Yeah, and did you know that some places don't serve slices of pizza?
really, they
They
just serve
either
like
give
whole
you a
pizzas.
pie. Yeah, I like recently found that out in during my trip in LA. Some places don't give you slices of pizza.
Oh, you
Crazy.
mean like around the
Uh,
world? Like, or
In
like,
in in certain places on the West Coast,
yeah,
they don't give you slices of pizza, like
that's
triangular slices of pizza. You have to buy a whole pizza.
that's how it was growing up for me. Like anywhere, like unless it was a buffet, you cannot purchase by the slice. Yeah, like when you get to New York, you
That's
purchase it by the
I
slice.
I didn't know that was a thing in other places. That's ridiculous to me. What am I supposed to do? Go to the corner store and order a pizza pie for myself? Come on
Well,
now.
they do. That's
Yeah.
why they sell like personal and kid sized pieces. And like, I think people typically just save the leftovers and eat them the next day.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I get that too, but
that's what I would do when I was in like South Brooklyn. We got like, I think it's called like Sunny John's or something. It's been around for like 30 years, and um I'd get like the extra large and I'd eat it for like 2 days. Love a good margarita pizza
mm, oof, don't get me started,
or a
because
grandma pizza.
my stomach is gonna start talking to me in different languages if you keep this on.
All right.
uh,
Did you? I feel like we've like talking. We're on the topic of like life beyond the classroom, and honestly, I don't think we can top a discussion of pizza.
no, philosophical conversation overshadowed by pizza.
Well,
Caption of the video.
well, no, I mean like
I mean, we
at
can.
least for the life beyond the classroom section, right? Like
Hmm.
maybe you could talk about. I mean, you have far more experiences in New York that because you were from here or from there.
Hmm.
Like, what about the museum visits? How were those?
Um, the museum visits. So, in terms of life outside of the classroom, I'm gonna take a more general approach in my answer.
Cool.
Just because, well, first of all, we weren't able to visit as many museums as we wanted to because of the pandemic, and just conflicts and schedules at times. We did go with Professor Harvey um, to a museum, but I think that the highlight of the semester for me personally, um, aside from the professors, which, were terrific, as we've discussed already, aside from the classes, which were also terrific, and which we've also discussed already, I think just the involvement that I had with my classmates, the interactions, the hangout sessions, the times that we would go to bars and discuss certain things, the little get-togethers, even the group me conversations that we would have, were by far for me the highlight of the semester, because I felt that, and I don't know if it was necessarily true for you, because I'm sure that a lot of your classes were probably virtual, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's halfway through my second semester. We went virtual. This coming semester will be my first time back in person.
right, right. So you um, probably haven't had that much experience recently in person, but we started off basically right away in person. And I got to know all of my classmates in the master's program. And also, since I took the class at Stony Brook in the PhD program, and I just felt like the energy was on another level in terms of just me feeling welcomed, me feeling like I had people who had very similar interests and also very different interests, that I
Mhm.
could talk about, and that I could learn more about, and just the overall kindness and just the welcoming spirit that was presented to me by my classmates was by far the highlight of my semester, because for me at least, regardless of how good the classes may be, regardless of how good the professors may be, it would not have been what I would have wanted it to be had it not been for the energy and just the overall vibe of my classmates. And I think I'm very appreciative of that, and I'm very lucky and blessed to have ended up with the classmates that I did end up with. And obviously now that we're all more comfortable with each other, we're gonna do more things together. Hopefully, if um, COVID permits it.
Mhm.
But it's nice that a lot of them are actually not from New York, because it's kind of on me to show them what there is to see in New York City, and that's something that I'm always very happy to do. Um, but yeah, just the relationships and the bonds that I've been able to form with my classmates, who I now call friends, this has definitely been the highlight of my semester. And whether it be just like casual conversations at a bar, dinners that we would have together. Let me just tell you a quick story. Actually, you know
Yeah,
Amanda. You spoke
Amanda
with Amanda.
Springs.
Yeah, she's an English professor.
Yeah, at
Um,
Maritime. I can't remember if that's SUNY or CUNY. I think it's SUNY. SUNY Maritime. I don't know. Yeah, she's an English professor. She told
yeah.
me she's in my cohort. She got into this program because
Oh, she's in your cohort. Okay.
yeah, she started, as far as I know, she started the same semester as me, but
Okay.
she's going part-time.
Right.
Um, and the reason even though she had a PhD in English, the reason she sought out this program was because her English department wanted her to, well, I guess she's like in the humanities department at her university.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They wanted her to start teaching more like logic and modern courses with like,
Right.
and so she wanted a more rigorous background in
Right. Okay.
philosophy.
So you're familiar with Amanda. Good. Um, Basically, one of our first couple of weeks there, she actually invited us to her apartment to just like chat, and get to know each other. Um, and as soon as we arrived to the apartment, we head on over to the living room, and there's a whole assortment of like cheese plates and snacks and food and beverages. Um, and I just thought that was like amazing, how she went through the trouble of making everything, like preparing everything herself, having this little like event and get together amongst ourselves after we had just previously visited a museum. And I just thought that was like so nice and just welcoming. and fantastic. And it gave us the ability to get to know each other a lot more. As you can imagine, we talked about a lot of philosophy, but also talked a lot about our personal lives. And play a lot of really fun games with each other. And I just thought it was a nice way to start forming relationships with each other. And from that point on, I think it's only been it's only gone up from there. And it's something that I've really appreciated, not just from Amanda, who did set that up to begin with, but just from all my classmates, what they've been able, the role that they've been able to play in my intellectual growth, my personal growth, and just my overall enjoyment in class has definitely been the highlight for me of the semester. So I think you will see what I'm talking about this upcoming semester as you put yourself back into in-person classes, and as we get to know each other more, you and I, as well as our other classmates. I think it's gonna be, you're gonna definitely see why I'm so adamant and so excited every time I talk about my classmates and just the overall energy and vibe. So yeah, you can let me know if I was on point with that assertion once you experience it.
Very excited. I really, I was already excited to get back for the rigor, the philosophy itself, the coursework, my goals for my future, wanting to become a professor eventually, all of that. And I was going to New York. I'm going to New York by myself, right? Like I was scared. I was nervous, and I had been preparing myself mentally to be resilient, to stay focused on my work. But now I'm like also just kind of like in a more comfortable place and excited to, I feel more confident that I have like a support network of colleagues and friends to,
Absolutely,
not just my family back here to lean into if I need to, but also, and not even just something to lean into if I need to, just something to enrich my experience. And I think that will stand. And the cohort you're talking about is a first year cohort, right? It's the 2021 cohort. So anybody who comes in this cycle will get to meet them.
Yeah, we just basically add on to that. And then Grant was part of it as well. Grant was part of it as well. Alyssa was part of it as well. And then I also, having taken the PhD class, I would include them in it as well. So even though due to the geographical limitations of, most PhD students live in Stony Brook, so
right,
we're not able really to hang out with them as much as I'd like. But I would definitely include them as well, because they were just all very friendly, good energy, lots of insights, lots of different interests. And I feel like you learn the most, honestly, from the interactions that you have with classmates. And yeah, it's something that I really appreciate. And I know for sure going forward, it's going to be a big reason why I am as happy as I am with the program.
Yeah, I remember my first 2 semesters in person, getting to see more of those, like getting to have conversations with PhD students, like during the break, in the middle of class, and before and after. Like with virtual, that's something I do miss, is like you got to like talk to your classmates during the break, and for in-person classes, but with virtual classes you didn't really get to. You just kind of all went and did your own thing for like 10 minutes. But I think in particular, if you have a chance to talk to PhD students, it's so valuable, because they're like this really interesting like stepping stone. Like you have like, you have your exposure to professors, and they're immutable and great models, of course, and you have your fellow MA students who are sort of like directly peers, and the level you should at least be meeting. But then you have like the in between with the PhD students, right? Like of the people who have that experience of taking consistently taking PhD courses. Maybe they've already done their like, I don't know what the technical term is, but the test that they take after 2 or 3 years that tests them on their knowledge of the history of philosophy. Their qualifying exam for the dissertation, I think is what it is. And
They're
they,
also, some of them are also teaching.
that's what I was going
Like,
to say next. Yeah, they're
yeah,
also like teaching
yeah.
courses. They've been research assistants, they've been teaching assistants. But yes, by the second, third, and fourth years, they're actually teaching their own courses, their own intro courses, or whatever it may be. Yeah, I think it's important to see all the shades along the way, the shades of lived experiences that you will be moving into, and getting to fraternize, I guess you'd call it. I don't know if that's a very technical word. Socialize, I think, is the more conventional word to use these days. Getting to meet them, getting to know them, getting to have conversations with them. It's great. I think you've really hit all the points as to why that is, and I'm really grateful that you brought up such a valuable part of the program. I was like talking about pizza, and you're over here like, okay, well, people are more important than pizza, Justin. Like,
Look, you can have the pizza with the people. So we don't have to, they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
yeah, there's a lot of great benefits to being in this program. Speaking of, like, what is your impression? What is your overall impression of the MA program?
Did you hear that?
I heard
The
a
honk.
honk, a honk. Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna see that's New York City for you. But yeah, no, like I've basically already, there you go. See,
Louder.
that's why you need to experience every single borough, because you won't really get a full grasp of it until you do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I meant to tell you. Ed mentioned one time that he loves the Bronx because when he wants to get us, when so New York has changed a lot in the past few decades, and when he wants to get a sense of what New York used to be like 20, 30 years ago, he will go to the Bronx because it feels like old New York.
Yeah, no, I echo that sentiment. Absolutely echo that sentiment. The Bronx, I mean, obviously there's been change over the years, but for the most part, the vibrant culture is still very much at play here. So yeah, you have to at some point come to the Bronx. But in terms of just the overall, or
Okay, hold on.
yeah,
I'm gonna be candid about this, because if
mhm.
the full length interview goes online, that's fine. I don't really mind. But also we're at a specific like segment cut if I need to. So I'm gonna reiterate the question for the coming segment. All I can see right now is your face. Do you want to do something about the lighting in your
Yeah. So okay, let me see. I'm gonna just turn on the light actually.
cool.
Oh, is that better?
Whoa. Yeah, that's great.
I'm back.
Welcome
Yeah,
back.
I'm gonna probably close this then. Hopefully it still has the same effect. Can you still, was it better the other way?
Better the other way.
Okay.
Because you're getting blue light from your screen and it's kind of,
Yeah. So this is good right here, right?
yeah, it's great.
Okay, perfect. We're back.
All right. So what has been your overall impression of your experience in the MA program? Like, especially how has it changed you philosophically
Yeah,
and personally?
yeah. So I've had a very enjoyable experience thus far, and I think it's been extremely helpful for just my overall development as a student and as a person. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the program was the fact that it's structured. It was structured in a way that helped me gradually get back into the swing of things. And what I mean by that is I've already talked about how it's been quite some time since I've been in a classroom setting. And, although I did, do a lot of preparation coming into the semester, you still feel a little bit of, I guess, anxiety, not necessarily anxiety, but it was sort of like a new experience for me all over again because I hadn't
Mhm.
been there in such a long time. But I feel like the classes and the structure of the classes and the structure of the program allowed me to kind of gradually get into that mindset without having to rush myself into things. And that's something that I really did appreciate about the program. And then you add on the fact that I got along very well with my classmates, as I've already mentioned. um, Great experience with the professors and just their openness to allow me or allow the students to dictate where discussions would go. I think was just extremely helpful because it allowed me to feel comfortable stating the things that I wanted to state, without having to censor myself too much. And by censor, I just mean I never worried about getting out of place or going off tangent because I know that they wanted us to basically dictate the interactions that we would have and the discussions that we would have. So I thought that was very valuable. But yeah, honestly, it was a great semester. I'm equally excited about this upcoming semester. I feel like my energy is right where it was, right before I had started the fall semester, and
Yeah.
so I'm really happy about that. I'm already doing a little bit of premature work in preparation for the classes. Um, but yeah, no, it definitely has had just a um, very good impact on me. And what I will say has changed, um, maybe change may not be the best word, but um, this could be something that a lot of applicants may relate to. But coming into the program, because of the overwhelming amount of interest that I have, there was always some skepticism and some doubt in terms of whether or not I was making the right decision, to get into um, graduate school in philosophy. But I think now that the semester's over and I can kind of look back at how I've grown in all these different dimensions, I am very happy to say that it was the right decision,
Mhm.
and that it did allow me to be in a place where I felt most comfortable, and most in a place where I feel like I could grow the most, in conjunction with faculty and classmates. And so, if anything, what the semester did, it was not only reinvigorate my passion for what I'm doing, for philosophy and for just overall academic discussion and um, learning from other students and professors, but it also made me aware of how, I guess, it made my decision. It made me happy about the decision that I made, um, to take part in the master's program at Stony Brook. Um, and I know when people apply to certain programs, I feel like there's always this skepticism or a little bit of doubt, and that definitely was the case a little bit for me because I had been working full time, even though I still am working full time, but I was working full time and wasn't in that setting for a long time, so I just had to think to myself at times about whether or not it was still the right place to be for me. And having finished that semester, I think I answered that question, um, and I think I am definitely in the place that I want to and need to be right now.
Yeah. That's great. It was a very thorough response. I don't have anything to add. Um, I yeah. So do you have any advice? Like if you think back to I mean, I guess you said a lot about what it was like for you to apply. Weren't really, you weren't really sure. You were coming back to school after a few years. You weren't really sure if philosophy was still right for you. Um, do you have any advice for prospective students? Like, I guess kind of like there's a couple of different kinds of advice I might have in mind, like advice about applying to school, about like
Right,
choosing a program, advice about what you find valuable in a program, advice about how to approach the program, advice about how to be a graduate student. I mean, there's lots of different kinds of advice you can give
right,
to people in that position that you've been in before, that you're 6 months ahead of, like you're freshly out of it. I
right.
think you have a lot of great things, probably a lot of the great things to say to that perspective. So this is your chance. Like, what do you have for them?
No, yeah, absolutely. I would say, in terms of advice, I'm going to speak about the approach when applying to school, and then I'm going to speak a little bit about how to potentially prepare
Okay.
for like your courses. Um, what comes to mind immediately in terms of the application process itself is to make sure that whatever places you decide to apply to get familiar with the faculty in that school. I think that was really helpful for me because it allowed me to, I guess, figure out whether or not certain programs aligned with the kind of interest that I had.
Hmm.
I remember my professor, the same one who sent me the lectures, also the same one who wrote my letter of recommendation, told me that it would be well advised to do thorough research on the research that faculty were doing in all these different places that I was applying. And so I do think, in terms of my advice, I would really advise anyone applying to any kind of program, whether it be philosophy or psychology, whatever it may be, to really take a look at the faculty and to try to get a sense of what their research entails and to see if it aligns in any way with yours, because um, you probably will end up doing research with one of these professors at some point. So it's important to have a keen understanding of what they're doing. um, and also, in addition to doing that research, that personal research, I would also advise you set up meetings with the professors, because there's only so much that you get from going to a website and reading their little paragraph on what their research involves. I think one of the biggest reasons why I decided to go to Stony Brook was because I had such a great meeting with Professor Casey. When we had about like an hour meeting about not just about the program, but just getting to know each other a little more,
Hmm.
because these are the people you're going to spend the next 2 years with, and potentially even more. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, so
Well,
it's
they're
good to.
like, I mean, I think I'll be colleagues and friends with these professors for as long as I'm in good standing in academia, which, I mean, I really hope that's forever. Like, I mean, like I hope.
Honestly, it's just like the relationships that I formed with my undergrad professors,
Yeah.
um, I thought were just really like I still talk to them to this day. And before I decided to apply, because obviously I told them about the fact that I'm applying to graduate school, and they were able to help in the form of letters of recommendation and other advice that they were able to give me. But
Yeah.
even before that, I always kept in contact with them on a personal level. So for me, it's really important to have that relationship with professors, and um, you won't really be able to get that vibe from just reading their research interests on the webpage. I think having that meeting like on Zoom or in person, whichever works best for the parties involved, can be really helpful in making sure that you make the right decision for you. And so, getting familiar with their interests and having that meeting with the professors in question, I feel like is very helpful. That's what I did, and it was helpful for me. Like I had a meeting with Professor Casey, but I also had a meeting with professors from all the other different schools, that I applied to, and that ended up accepting me. Yeah, and that's the biggest advice I would have for applicants. And then in terms of preparing, honestly, I would just what I ended up doing with the lectures that my professor sent me was very helpful for me,
Hmm.
because it didn't just allow me to get back into just some of the practical things that I would be learning about. It didn't just help me in terms of accumulating information that I would use during the semester and throughout the semester, but it just helped me get into that mindset, into that general mindset that I needed to be in order to thrive in an academic environment. And so you don't have to email your professor and ask them to send you lectures like I did. But whether it be reading a book or getting familiar with certain things that you may know that you're going to get involved in the future, all of that can be really helpful in sort of getting the ball rolling, and getting you into that mindset that you need to be for that environment. And I understand that some students apply right after school, and they already are in that mindset, and maybe they don't need to fill, I guess, to fill that void like I needed to. But I think nonetheless it is very helpful to make sure you take, like, maybe a couple weeks, a couple months to get yourself in that right mindset. And also, um, it's impossible, in my opinion, um, to thrive in that environment if you're not doing well in other aspects, such as like emotionally or physically. So just a personal advice for anyone applying. If you are going through any kind of either mental or emotional distress, um, I would take the time to make sure that you can improve that as best as you can, to take care of yourself as best as you can, so that you are ready for the challenges and the obstacles that are going to be presented, given whatever academic um, curriculum you end up involving yourself in. So, just making sure you're mentally there, emotionally there. I know we discussed a little bit about that, and just physically well. Also, is just very important in preparation for those kinds of challenges ahead.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Despite the fact that graduate study is an intensive pursuit, um, and a fairly competitive one if you want to stay in the field, um, thereby compounding the intensivity of it. Intensity, I don't know. Um, Balance is super important. You can't go without balance. Like, there may be different weights to the balance. There may be, maybe
Yeah,
the academic part is a greater distribution or more a higher percentage in the distribution of how you spend your time and your energy, but they're 100, like it cannot be 90%. I mean, it can't make you burn out. You really need that balance. That's been my experience. So
absolutely. Yeah. And in addition to the lectures that I've so often mentioned already in this interview, I did do a lot of just therapeutic activities that really helped me get into an overall um, mental and emotional state that allowed me to enjoy the semester as much as I enjoyed it. Um, so yeah, I think that would be my main advice to those who are applying and or getting ready to pursue something specifically.
yeah, and one thing I love about our program, I mean, for me, I'm an artist, so I have like all sorts of coping mechanisms that are aesthetic, right? Whether it's playing guitar, writing poetry, um, I do visual art, painting, ink, um, or listening to music, like, or I consume aesthetic, I consume art just as much, if not more often than I make it. And I find it really efficient slash utilitarian slash effective that I get to restore and heal and revivify through practices which directly impact my research. Um, Anytime I'm making a piece of art, even though it has the sort of mindfulness, restorative, balancing a component to it, it is also something I can, like, I haven't fully turned off the philosophical aspect. I'm still doing like intuitive experiential research in that moment. Um, and that's, I don't know, something I'm grateful for with our combination of aesthetics and philosophy. Um, or, I mean, yes, aesthetics is part of philosophy, a combination of art.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Do you have anything else or any last thoughts or any, I mean, you're going to be a big last thought. It could be a whole nother, this is your chance to add something on if you want to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in terms of final thoughts, I just want to echo the sentiment that the program has really impacted my overall development just as a person. And I'm very appreciative of that. I'm very appreciative of everything I've been able to learn from my professors and from my classmates. And I'm just really excited to um, face these upcoming obstacles um, head on during the spring semester. So yeah, overall, just a great experience. I'd like to also thank you, Justin, for putting all of this together. I know it's probably not the easiest thing to organize all these Instagram posts and interviews and all the things that you do for the program. I think it's going to be really helpful in giving people like a good impression and a good idea of what the program's about. And I know, via your text messages and emails that you're working really hard at trying to put this all together. And I think thus far you've done, a fantastic job. And I know you're going to continue to do a fantastic job. So, the last shout out goes to you, for putting this all together. So, I know I speak on behalf of all of us that, we're very appreciative of what you're doing, and we're always happy to help you, whenever you need anything for the program. So, just like to thank you for doing that.
I'm trying not to cry. Like, it's really sweet of you.
You gotta give a shout out. You've been working hard, and I know we've had to reschedule a couple times. So, um, we're supposed to have this interview a few other times, but I can see, how much hard work you're putting into it, and so I am honored, to play a part in that, and so just know that your work is definitely not being taken for granted, and we can all see just how valuable it is to our program and just getting our voices out there in general. So yeah, keep doing your thing.
Yeah, I'm really, um, Eric Erickson has this, eight stages of psychosocial development, and I've been kind of on the fence about having kids for a while, but there's a stage where it's like typically it's fulfilled through having kids, but you can do it through any kind of way of investing back into the greater society. And it comes after individuation and after developing a relationship, it's like the sixth or seventh stage. And that's really just how I've been feeling about this, is like, I have no idea what's going to happen after this application cycle for a PhD program. I have no idea what's going to happen after I graduate, but I can invest in something bigger than me, something concretely bigger than me. I really wasn't expecting the gratitude. That's really kind of, I don't know. I don't have adequate words to, just thank you. Um, I was getting ready to thank you for your time. Like, like,
I beat you to
yeah.
it.
But yes, thank you for your time. This is, I think this is like almost a 2 hour interview, if not like quite long. Um, and yeah, I hope it really, I hope it can help the right people show up at this program to get what they need to harmonize, um, to harmonize the people with the resources around them.
Hmm.
All right, so that's it. That's all, folks. Um,
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.